It was supposed to be just a photo, one silly staged picture that the student council took before prom. Nothing formal. Just a group of us in the auditorium lobby, all dressed in matching shirts, and posing like idiots. I remember standing on the edge, smiling, arms awkwardly pressed to my sides because no one wanted to stand too close. I told myself it was fine. At least I made it into the picture. Or so I thought. When the photo was posted later that night on the school's official account, I stared at the screen like my breath had just been knocked out of me. I was gone. The crop was clean, surgical. Even the photo started right where my shoulder would have been, and ended one student before me on the other side, as if I had never stood there at all, as if I'd never existed. At first I thought, maybe they made a mistake, maybe someone uploaded the wrong version, maybe the full photo would come later. But then I saw the comments. Squad looks amazing. The real ones only. Laughing emojis. My name wasn't mentioned once. I didn't eat dinner that night. My mom asked if everything was okay, and I said I was just tired. She told me I looked beautiful in my prom dress fittings, and that the kids at school were probably jealous. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Because the truth was, they had erased me. Deliberately. I wasn't some oversight. I was unwanted, inconvenient, disposable. I didn't have many friends. That was never a secret. I was always the quiet one sitting in the back, speaking only when spoken to. I liked books more than people, silence more than attention. My mom said I was special. The others said I was weird. And at some point, I started to believe them. The worst part, one of the girls in that photo used to be my best friend, Sarah. We'd been inseparable in middle school. She taught me how to braid my hair, and I helped her study for math. But high school turned her into someone else. She got pretty, confident, loud, and I became her shadow. The thing she shrugged off when the spotlight came. When I texted her about the photo, she left me on read. The next day, the cropped photo was printed in the school newspaper. I don't know what hurt more, being erased or knowing no one even noticed. I sat in the library during lunch, pretending to read while blinking away the tears. That's when Mrs. Alvarez found me. She was the art teacher, strange, soft-spoken, always carrying paint on her sleeves. She sat beside me without asking. I saw the photo, she said quietly, and I saw the full version before they cut it. I didn't say anything, just nodded. She took out a folded print, the original photo. There I was, awkward, smiling very much there. You have every right to be upset, she said. But don't let them define you. Don't give them that power. I wanted to cry. She was the only one who merely saw me. But no one else cared. Not the principal. Not the other teachers. Certainly not the students. I was invisible again. Mrs. Alvarez handed me a sketch pad. I want you to draw something this weekend. Anything. Just don't disappear. That night, I drew for hours. Not just for the assignment, but to breathe. I sketched the photo, but I drew myself larger, in the center. I gave myself wings, a crown. Not out of vanity, just to remind myself I existed, that I mattered. But deep down, something broke in me. Not because of the photo, not because of Sarah, but because in that moment, I realized I could scream and the world would still talk over me. So, I stopped trying to be heard, but I started writing, planning. Not for revenge. Not yet. Just for myself. After the photo, it didn't stop, it escalated. That cropped image turned into a meme. I found it printed and taped inside lockers. Someone added a caption. Guess someone didn't make the cut. I saw it on stories with laughing emojis. I overheard whispers in the hallways. Did she even go to prom? Maybe she's just a ghost. Oh, you mean Crop Girl. They gave me a nickname. Not a cute one. Not one I asked for. Just something for them to laugh about. Crop Girl. It stuck out. What hurt the most wasn't just the cruelty. It was how casual it was, how easy it was for them. Like making fun of me was a daily habit, just another laugh before math class. The teachers heard it too, but they never said a word. Maybe they didn't want to get involved. Maybe they didn't care. Or maybe, in some twisted way, they agreed. My seat in the cafeteria got taken. I was the first to arrive one afternoon and found my usual spot filled with 3 girls, who looked me up and down like I was interrupting. Oh, one of them said. Didn't see you there. I turned and walked away without saying a word. They laughed like that was the punchline. Every day felt like walking through a hall of mirrors. Except every reflection was warped and cruel. I started walking with my head down, talking less, dressing simpler. I didn't want to give them more to mock. I just wanted to disappear completely, and yet, I couldn't help but notice how visible I suddenly was. Not in a good way. Not because someone wanted to know me. I was visible the way a stain on a white shirt is visible. Something everyone points at, just to feel cleaner themselves. My old friend Sarah never said a word. She didn't laugh. She didn't defend me, she just ignored me. Which was worse in a way, because she used to know me. She used to sleep over at my house, eat my mom's cooking, cry over dumb crushes in my bedroom. Now, I was less than nothing. I went to the guidance counselor once. I sat across from her, hands shaking, and tried to explain that I felt like I was disappearing. That people were cruel, even if it wasn't physical. She listened, smiled politely, and handed me a pamphlet about online safety. Try logging off for a few days, she suggested. Sometimes social media makes things seem worse than they are. Worse than they are. That week, someone edited me out of a group photo from the school yearbook. I know because the original was still on the wall outside the principal's office. And the one that made it into print, I was missing. Not just cropped or brushed out. As if my existence was inconvenient. A glitch to be corrected. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I felt numb. Like all the feelings had been drained out of me. Like I was watching my life happen through a screen and couldn't reach in to change anything, Mrs. Alvarez noticed. She stopped me after art class and asked if I was okay. I said yes. She looked at me for a long time and said, "Sometimes, people laugh when they're scared. They see something in you they can't understand, so they mock it." I wanted to believe her, but all I could feel was shame. Shame for existing. For thinking I could belong. For daring to stand in a photo with people who never wanted me there in the first place. I walked home in silence that day. No music in my headphones, just the sound of my own breath and the crunch of leaves under my shoes. When I got home, I went to my room, closed the door, and opened my sketchbook. I drew the hallway, but I made the lockers grow teeth. The students had no faces, just mouths, all laughing. And in the middle, a girl made of glass, cracked, but still standing. That night, I promised myself, they could mock me, erase me, laugh behind my back, but I wouldn't break, not yet. The day I decided to speak up was the day I finally broke my silence. After weeks of being mocked, erased, and turned into a hallway joke, I reached my limit when I caught a group of students passing around a printed photo of the prom, the same one I had been erased from again. Only this time, they had added a cartoon crown and drawn devil horns above where my head would have been. A joke, a taunt, a message. You don't belong here. I wasn't planning to say anything. I never was. But something inside me cracked. Maybe it was the exhaustion of being invisible and ridiculed at the same time. Maybe it was remembering how my mother used to say, even silence has a voice. Or maybe I just couldn't take another day of pretending I was fine, so I did what every student was told to do when facing harassment. I went to an adult. To someone I thought would understand. Someone who, in theory, was supposed to listen. Mr. Hensley taught civics, and always carried a tone of detached wisdom, like he'd seen too much to be surprised by anything. I stayed after class and asked if I could speak to him privately. He leaned against his desk, arms folded, his expression unreadable. I told him everything. About the photo, the meme, the hallway whispers, how I'd been erased from the yearbook, how no one spoke to me anymore, and when they did, it was only to remind me how laughable I'd become. My voice trembled, my hands shook. I didn't cry, but I wanted to scream. He listened, then he sighed and said, "Look, I get that you're upset, but high school is rough for everyone. Maybe just try not to take it so personally. Don't make a scene out of something that'll pass." I stared at him. I waited for him to say more, but he didn't. "Don't make a scene," that was his answer. Not, "I'll talk to them," not, "That's unacceptable," not, "You deserve better," just a gentle push toward silence. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, screaming for help and watching the lifeguard turn away. The worst part, I nodded. I thanked him. I left the room like a good, quiet student. I didn't know where to go after that. I wandered the hallway, dragging my fingers along the lockers, barely noticing the stairs. I ended up in the art wing, where no one ever went during lunch. That's where I found Mrs. Alvarez again. She was rearranging the supplies in the back of the room when she noticed me. "You're not usually here right now," she said, gentle but curious. I didn't answer. I sat down and opened my sketchbook. She didn't press me, she just let me sit there. A few minutes passed in silence. Then she said, without looking up, "You know, sometimes the people in power want things quiet because loudness threatens their control." It hit me harder than I expected, because Mr. Hensley wasn't trying to help me, he was trying to protect the system, the neat little order of things. The same order that allowed the popular kids to humiliate the quiet girl and walk away smiling that night. At home, I looked through my old journals, notes from my mother before she passed. One entry stood out: "People will always try to define you by your weakest moment. Don't let them write your story." I copied that sentence onto the back of my hand. The next day, I didn't talk to Mr. Hensley. I didn't yell at the kids who laughed. I walked into the library, sat in the back corner, and opened my laptop. I started writing. Not an essay, not a complaint. A plan. A blueprint for a new school-wide initiative that would focus on visibility, fairness, student-led projects, and reforming prom nominations into something earned, not voted. It was a joke at first, just something to fill the silence, but soon, it became more. It became mine. There's a moment that comes after every humiliation where the world expects you to break, to sob in the bathroom stall, to disappear from class, to shrink smaller than you already are. And maybe that's what they all expected of me. But I didn't cry. Not in the bathroom, not at home. Not in the dark where it would have been allowed. Instead, I took notes. Every whisper, every side eye, every fake smile, every time I was talked over in class, or ignored in a group project. I began writing it all down. Not to expose them, not yet. But because something in me had shifted. A quiet growing fire that refused to die the way my voice had all those months. I didn't even know what I was building at first. It started in the back pages of my sketchbook. Pages that once held drawings of trees and clouds, now held names, quotes, details, patterns. I started mapping behaviors, seeing the way cruelty always echoed itself. How one smirk in the hallway turned into exclusion from a group project. How silence from a teacher often followed the laugh of someone popular. It was like connecting dots no one else dared to admit were related. And as I took notes, I started reading. I devoured everything I could find. Books on social dynamics, education systems, emotional manipulation, the psychology of exclusion. It wasn't vengeance that drove me. It was clarity. I wasn't imagining things. What they were doing had names, labels, definitions: gaslighting, social erasure, groupthink, scapegoating. By giving the pain structure, I took back some control. The cafeteria became my observation deck. The classrooms, my case studies, even the locker room gossip had purpose now. I listened, not with fear, but with analysis. The more I understood them, the less power they had over me. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. I was invisible, because they made me that way. And now, I was watching. Mrs. Alvarez noticed the change. She didn't ask questions, but she started letting me stay in her classroom during lunch. One day she slipped a notebook onto my desk. Thick, leather-bound, untouched. "Whatever it is you're writing," she said, "make it count." That was the moment the sketchbook turned into something else. A manifesto, almost not a list of enemies, but a collection of ideas. Thoughts about what school could be, what prom should be. I wrote about fairness, about recognition, about how the people who build the heart of a school are never the ones in the yearbook's spotlight. I stopped reacting to insults. Instead, I imagined how I would redesign the system that made them feel so safe in their cruelty. That's when the idea hit me. A program that didn't just acknowledge the overlooked students but celebrated them. A project that restructured prom voting, participation, and recognition. It would start small, like an essay competition or a student-led committee. But in my notebook, it became a full plan with goals, timelines, and execution. It was bold, unrealistic, maybe even naive, but it made me feel alive again, somehow. Between being erased and being mocked, I started to rewrite my future. I began documenting ways to use the very thing they used to hurt me, exclusion, as the reason to build something no one could ignore, not revenge. Reinvention. And I still remember the night I wrote the last line of that plan, after everyone else in the house was asleep. It was past midnight, and the moonlight touched the pages just enough to see what I wrote in bold ink. If they won't give you a seat at the table, build your own, and let them watch you eat. It wasn't about being seen anymore. It was about making them realize they were never as powerful as they thought. That's when I knew the pain wasn't the end of my story. It was the blueprint. I never told anyone about the application. Not the classmates who laughed behind my back. Not the teachers who barely remembered my name. And especially not the girls who cropped me out of the prom photos and made a group chat just to mock what I wore. This was mine. Quietly, stubbornly, defiantly minded. Started with a late-night search. One of those evenings where you stare at the ceiling and wonder if you'll ever escape the box people put you in. I typed in a few random words. Scholarship, overcoming adversity, student leader without a title. I didn't even think I'd find anything. But there it was. A national competition sponsored by an education reform foundation. They were looking for students who had created innovative ideas to improve school culture. My hands shook as I read it, because it felt like someone had written it for me. I submitted the notebook, well, not the whole thing, just enough. A summarized version of my plan to redesign prom inclusivity, but with real data, with my sketches, structure, and philosophy. I didn't think I'd win. I just needed to try. That was the first time in a long time I had done something out of hope, instead of survival. Weeks passed. The bullying didn't stop. If anything, it got worse. There was a TikTok where someone edited my face onto a cartoon character with #PromReject written underneath. I didn't watch the whole thing. I didn't need to. I just walked past them in the halls with my eyes forward, my spine a little straighter. Because I had a secret, and sometimes secrets keep you standing. Then came the letter. Thick envelope, gold seal. I opened it alone in my room. The words blurred as I read. Congratulations, you have been selected. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat on the edge of my bed, hands over my mouth, heart pounding, and I whispered, they don't even know. It wasn't just the money though. It was enough to pay for an entire undergraduate degree. It was what came with it. Mentorship, travel, an invitation to speak at a national education conference, and most of all, validation. Someone out there had seen value in what I had to say. Someone believed I could make a difference. I wore that truth like armor. The taunts didn't pierce as deep anymore. The glares slid off me. Even when I walked by a bulletin board covered in prom posters I wasn't invited to design, I smiled. Because I had something bigger. Something real. But I didn't tell anyone. Not even Mrs. Alvarez. Not yet. Because this wasn't about showing off. It was about knowing deeply, fiercely, that I was no longer who they said I was. They could call me forgettable, awkward, unwanted. But I was becoming something stronger than their labels. I was becoming undeniable. The timing was poetic. Just a few months later I received another letter. This one from the school board. They were launching a district-wide initiative to improve student leadership and had noticed my scholarship. Would I be interested in participating? More than that, would I be interested in organizing something for the students at my old high school? I almost laughed. The same school that once pushed me out now wanted me to return. As a guest of honor. I didn't say yes immediately. I waited. I read the letter 3 times. And then I walked past the same kids who'd once laughed at my thrifted clothes, and I realized they were still standing in the same circles. Still talking about the same things, but I was moving, growing, becoming. It was never about revenge. It was about creating something so brilliant, so untouchable, that even those who tried to erase me would have no choice but to see me now. And the best part? They still didn't know what was coming. The first step back into that building felt like walking into a preserved museum of pain. Same linoleum floors, Same peeling motivational posters that told kids to be kind, even though kindness had been the rarest currency in those halls. I had always imagined this moment, dreamed it, even. But when it finally happened, I wasn't sure if I wanted to cry or laugh. Maybe both. It had been 4 years since I graduated. 4 years since I stood in the back row of the group photo. That never made it to the yearbook, because someone accidentally deleted the file. 4 years since I left that school, carrying more silence than celebration. And now I was back not as a student, but as the newly appointed coordinator of the Regional School Improvement Initiative, with full access and authority over one special pilot project, restructuring the school's social events. Starting with prom, no one recognized me, and that was the most poetic part. They looked at my name on the program and blinked. Some tilted their heads, narrowing their eyes like they were trying to match a face to a foggy memory. I had changed. No more oversized hoodies or slouched posture. No more eyes darting to the floor. My hair was pulled back in a clean bun, my posture tall, my voice steady. But it wasn't just the physical difference, it was something deeper. I had built a life outside of their small world. I had stepped into the light they always told me didn't exist for people like me. As I stood at the front of the auditorium to give a short introduction, I scanned the audience. There were a few teachers I recognized. Some avoided eye contact. Some smiled as if nothing had ever happened. And then, near the third row, I saw her. Rachel. She hadn't changed much. Same expensive highlights, same smug posture. The girl who once laughed the loudest when they cropped me out of those pictures. The girl who created the group chat dedicated to mocking my outfits, my laugh, my existence. She stared at me with a curious squint, like I was a puzzle she couldn't quite solve, and I let her wonder. That day, I was professional. I didn't bring up the past. I shook hands, reviewed logistics, talked about prom themes, budgeting, and scheduling. But under the surface, my heartbeat hummed with something electric like justice that didn't need to shout. When I walked through the hallways during a tour, I passed the spot where I once overheard someone say, I was only invited to pity parties. I paused there for just a second, long enough to remember that girl who had stood in that same spot, holding back tears and pretending not to care. She wasn't gone, she lived inside me, but she no longer drove the car. One teacher pulled me aside after the meeting, Mr. Klein. He had been one of the few who wasn't outright cruel, but indifferent, which sometimes hurt more. He asked, You used to go here, right? Your name, it sounds familiar. I smiled. I did. For 4 years he looked stunned. Wow. I didn't recognize you. You look different. I had to. I said softly, and then, almost like a reflex, he said, Well, I'm glad you're doing well now. Now, as if I hadn't always deserved to do well. As if worthiness had to be proven post-humiliation. I nodded politely, then turned back to finish the tour. They didn't recognize me, because they had never truly seen me. Not when I sat alone at lunch, not when I raised my hand in class and was ignored. Not when I was sobbing quietly in the bathroom stall on the day of prom, pretending to have a headache so I could leave early. They never looked close enough. But now, they had no choice. Because the new prom, the reimagined event that was about to take place under my direction, wasn't just about dresses and dances. It was about rewriting a script. About building something for the students who lived in the margins, who knew what it was like to be erased, mocked, forgotten. Students like me. And when the planning committee gathered for the first official meeting with students and faculty in attendance, I stood at the front with a clear voice and full authority. I wasn't just participating, I was leading. They didn't know my past, but they would learn my purpose. And as Rachel walked in late, giving me a half smile like we were old friends, I simply nodded. She took a seat, no laughter, no whispers, just silence. Because I was no longer the punchline. I was the one writing the rules. They gave me full creative direction. That was their first mistake. They thought I would copy the old format. Golden balloons, cheap confetti, some outdated playlist of top 40 hits, a royal court decided by popularity and favoritism. The same hollow rituals that meant everything to some meant nothing to people like I was. But I had waited too long, survived too much, and learned more than they ever expected. This wasn't going to be a dance. It was going to be a statement, and every detail would speak. My first decision was to change the theme. No more masquerade cliches or fairy tale ballrooms. I chose reflections, a theme that meant nothing to them, but everything to me. I designed the venue with long mirrored panels that reached from floor to ceiling, not to admire beauty, but to confront it, to make people see themselves, not the version they presented online, but who they really were. Because back then, I saw reflections of myself everywhere, and none of them felt welcome. Next, I rewrote the nomination system. There would be no votes for prom royalty from clicks. No anonymous ballots filled by popular kids campaigning like politicians. Instead, every student would submit a nomination based on personal stories, moments of kindness, resilience, leadership, and silence. I created a committee made up of staff, overlooked students, and alumni from underrepresented groups to review each submission. It wasn't about who smiled the most in selfies, it was about who mattered when no one was looking. I expected resistance. I got silence. They were watching me closely now. Rachel hadn't figured it out yet. She still thought this was just another school event, and she was already making assumptions that her name would be on the short list of candidates. But she had no idea how this game was being played now. She had ruled a kingdom built on exclusion. I was building one where her tactics had no currency. Behind the scenes, I worked tirelessly with the planning team students, who had never even been invited to prom before. One of them, Theo, stuttered so badly when he spoke in class that most teachers never called on him. But when he designed the lighting layout for the event, he became the voice that directed every fixture. Another, Alina, wore the same thrift store dress every Friday, and people used to laugh. She was now in charge of the event's aesthetics, and she made that mirror room look like poetry. I gave roles to the invisible ones, because I remembered what it felt like to be invisible. The final week before the event, I sat alone in the venue, watching it come to life. For the first time, it felt like the building was listening. Like the walls that had once held my shame were now holding my triumph. I didn't need to decorate it with revenge. The space itself was the proof. When I saw the candidate list come together, I knew the moment was coming. Rachel had been nominated once. A short message scribbled with no signature. She's pretty, that was it. No story, no substance. The judges didn't even blink when they moved past her name. But another name came up repeatedly. A girl I had never spoken to, but whose story felt too familiar. Her name was April. She was quiet, withdrawn, often mocked for wearing him. But she had been the first to notice when a student was being harassed online and reported ITFN. Though no one thanked her, she tutored another kid in algebra every week without ever asking for recognition. When someone's bike got stolen, she walked him to school for a month. No fanfare, no applause, just small acts of courage. And so, April was added to the list of finalists. Rachel wasn't. The announcement was made publicly, through posters and the school website. When Rachel saw the names, I watched her freeze. It was like something inside her cracked for the first time. She wasn't angry. She was confused. As if someone had broken the script she'd always followed. No one said her name. No one asked what happened. They simply moved on. She approached me after a planning meeting. "Hey," she said. "So I guess I'm not on the list." I looked her in the eye for the first time in years. "No," I said calmly. "Not this time." She gave me a half smile, one of those old smirks meant to disarm, to manipulate. "Guess you're in charge now, huh?" "I've always been in charge of my story," I replied. "You just never noticed." She didn't say anything else. Just walked away. That night I stayed late in the venue again, watching the lights blink in slow rhythm. This wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about correction, restoration, building something for those who never believed they had a place. This prom wasn't mine, it was all of ours. And as I looked around the mirrored room, I saw 100 versions of myself reflected back, not erased, not cropped. Finally seen her name lit up on the screen like a wound reopening. Samantha Hayes. I hadn't heard that name spoken out loud in years. But the second it appeared on the finalist board nominated by another student for some minor achievement, it was like every hallway whisper came rushing back in stereo. Samantha wasn't like Rachel. She wasn't the obvious queen bee or the girl in the spotlight. She wasn't the leader of the cruelty, she was its echo. The kind who laughed just loud enough to make it sting, but quiet enough to feign innocence. The kind who looked at you with mock surprise when you finally broke. She was always there, just to the side of the main scene, watching my humiliation and enjoying it without ever getting her hands dirty. I remember the moment she laughed the loudest. It wasn't in class. It wasn't even during the cropped photo incident. It was the day I showed up in that thrifted black dress my mom helped me sew. It didn't follow the latest trend, but it made me feel elegant. She looked me up and down, smirked, then turned to her friend and whispered something. Seconds later, my phone buzzed my picture in that same dress. Now captioned with Morticia called, she wants her funeral outfit back. That post got shared 17 times in the first hour. I never wore that dress again now. Here she was, one of the prom court finalists, standing in the decorated hallway like nothing had happened, still surrounded by girls who giggled when she tossed her hair, still walking like the floor had been polished just for her feet. When she saw me reviewing the list that day, she gave a casual nod, as if we were equals now, as if the past had crumbled into something weightless and irrelevant. I gave no reaction. I just returned the nod and walked past her. But that night, something gnawed at me. I wasn't angry, at least not in the way I expected to be. I wasn't plotting. I wasn't thinking about embarrassing her, or having her removed. Instead, I thought about how fragile her presence on that list was. How desperately she still clung to validation. How terrified she must have been to lose it, and I thought, let her stay. Let her walk this path. Let her wear the dress, rehearse the smile, take her selfies. Let her believe the night still belonged to people like her. Because I wasn't interested in taking her place, I was interested in redefining what the place meant. This time, it wasn't about stealing a spotlight. It was about changing what the light revealed. In the days leading up to the event, I watched her. She was rehearsing a persona, fixing her hair more often, practicing laughs that didn't feel real. She was trying to become a version of herself that could be admired. But I already knew her real reflection, and I knew that her own fear was louder than anything I could say. The day of the prom arrived. Everyone wore their stories like second skins. Some had gowns that shimmered, others had nerves that did. I wore a simple white satin suit with silver embroidery, structured, elegant, the same color I wore when I accepted my scholarship years earlier. The color my mom said made me look like I belonged somewhere safe. When Samantha saw me, her smile cracked. Just a little. She wasn't sure what to make of me anymore. I wasn't the girl in the thrift store dress. I wasn't the girl with hunched shoulders. I was the one calling the names now. I was the one holding the envelope. And as we lined up, the finalists backstage, she stood across from me. You look different, she said, hesitating. I smiled gently. I know. You planning to win tonight? She asked, a bit too brightly. No, I replied. I already did, and I meant it. Because the win wasn't the crown. It was the stillness I carried. The calm power of someone who no longer needed revenge to feel whole. I didn't need to make her feel small. She was already shrinking in the mirror I had built. When she walked onto the stage and the lights hit her face, I watched the room watch her. Some people cheered, some didn't. No one really remembered why she was up there. But they remembered me. And when the moment came to read the name of the prom queen, the real one, chosen by a process that no clique could control, everyone went silent, even Samantha, especially Samantha. But I didn't look at her. I looked out over the crowd. Beyond the lights, beyond the years, beyond the girl I used to be. Because this moment was never about who mocked me. It was about who I chose to celebrate now, and I was just getting started. The auditorium had never been that quiet. It was the kind of silence that didn't just fill a room, it pressed into your chest. Not even the DJ dared play a sound. The paper in my hand, the official card with the name of the prom queen, felt heavier than it should have. Not because of the paper itself, but because of what it represented. A decision, a shift, a closing of a chapter no one else even knew they were in. All eyes were on me, though not all recognized me as the girl they once knew. That girl who used to blend into the wallpaper. The one who sat alone during assemblies, who carried her lunch tray like it weighed 100 pounds. the one who wasn't in the group photo because she'd been cropped out. But tonight, I was not only in the frame, I held the frame, and before I said a single word, I looked out into the crowd and saw the same faces that had once turned away from me. Only now, they couldn't look away. There was Rachel, in a sequined dress that shimmered with a desperation only visible to those who knew her well enough. There was Mr. Halpern, the teacher who once told me I should aim a little lower because I wasn't leadership material. There were the girls who turned my life into a group chat joke, and boys who once laughed as I passed their lunch table like a ghost. They were all waiting, but I wasn't going to give them what they expected. I wasn't there to humiliate anyone. That would have made me one of them. I didn't want their kind of justice. I wanted to rewrite the moment I took the mic, adjusted it calmly, and let the pause linger just long enough to remind them that silence can be more powerful than applause. Then I began to speak. Before I read this name, I said, I want to say something to every student who ever felt invisible in this room. There was a small stir, whispers in the back, a few confused expressions in the front row. I want to speak to the ones who were edited out, talked over, laughed at, or made to feel like background characters in someone else's story. The ones who stayed late to clean up, who sat in the back, who never got asked to dance. You were never the problem. You were the proof that this place needed to change. You could hear the breath hitch in a few throats. I was one of you. I still am. But I've learned something important. The stage doesn't belong to the loudest voice. It belongs to the one who knows how to use it. I looked down at the card. I'm proud to announce this year's prom queen. I could feel the tension tightening in the air. Is someone who knows the value of kindness. Someone who made space for others, even when no one made space for her. Someone who reminded us all that real royalty isn't about popularity, it's about empathy. I turned the card so the audience couldn't see. I could have read any name at that moment. They wouldn't have questioned it. The list had been narrowed down through a private vote, curated by the committee I led. The name on the card had won by a small margin. But I had the power now. Not to abuse it, but to honor it. I said the name aloud. Lena Morale. A quiet gasp, followed by a thunderous wave of applause. Lena was in the back, not even standing near the stage. She was the girl who tutored younger students during lunch breaks. The one who helped the janitor organize lost and found donations. The one who smiled but rarely spoke, unless spoken to. I had seen her, even when no one else did. And now, so had they. She walked up stunned, unsure of where to place her hands, how to hold herself. I saw the doubt flicker in her eyes, then the warmth return when she saw mine. She didn't cry, but her hands shook as I placed the crown on her head, and in the background I saw Samantha. Her lips pressed tightly together, her cheeks still holding the forced smile she'd practiced. She clapped politely, but her eyes told the story she couldn't voice. She knew. They all knew. The power had shifted. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation, taking back the stage, rewriting the story, giving voice to someone who reminded me of who I had been and who I had become. I stepped back and let Lena have the spotlight. I didn't need it anymore. I had already done what I came to do, and in that moment, for the first time in my life, I felt seen, not because I had shouted, but because I had chosen to speak when it mattered. It was only after the crowd had cleared, the music had faded, and the decorations had started to come down that I stood alone on the stage. The same one where I had announced the prom queen hours earlier. The same one I once stood below, unnoticed, unwanted. I looked out at the now empty gymnasium, balloons deflated, glitter scattered like remnants of illusions, and let the silence settle into my bones. This wasn't just a school gym anymore. It was a battlefield I had crossed barefoot. A place that once erased me now echoed with my voice. I walked toward the giant backdrop, still hanging behind the photo booth, our makeshift memory wall. It was a collage of snapshots taken throughout the night, students laughing, dancing, posing. I recognized every face. But there, in the center, was the one photo they couldn't crop me out of. I was in it, just front and center, standing tall beside Lena, the crown on her head, the mic still in my hand. My face was calm, my expression not triumphant, but grounded. That picture wasn't taken to mock me, or to edit me out later. It was taken because I was part of the moment. Because this time, I owned it. Years ago, when they erased me from the class photo, I remember staring at the empty space where I should have been. I remember refreshing the upload over and over again, thinking maybe it was a mistake, maybe they had another version, one where I smiled just enough to earn a corner of visibility. But that version never came, so I built my own. I didn't need to be in their picture anymore. I made my own frame and decided who was allowed in it. From the corner of my eye, I noticed someone walking up behind me. It was Miss Carter, my old English teacher. The one who once saw me crying after class and simply slid a tissue box across the desk instead of asking what was wrong. Tonight, she looked different. Smaller somehow. Humbled, she reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "I know I should have done more," she said quietly. "Back then, I saw what they did to you, and I didn't have the courage. I didn't answer at first. Not because I was angry, but because I wasn't sure what to do with the apology. After so many years of silence, some words come. Too late to heal, but not too late to be heard. I used to wish someone would say that," I finally said, "not for revenge, just so I wouldn't feel crazy for remembering it all." She nodded, then left the envelope with me and walked away. Inside was a letter, handwritten, an admission. She named names, described moments I'd buried so deeply I thought I'd imagined them. But she remembered too, and she said she hoped this would help close a chapter I never asked to be written. It did, not because I needed her validation, but because her silence had once been part of my pain, and now her voice became part of my healing. Before leaving, I walked to the very edge of the gym, right up to the windows that overlooked the school courtyard. The same courtyard where I used to sit alone at lunch, where they laughed, where they pointed, where Samantha once whispered something cruel about my dress, loud enough for everyone to hear now. From this window I could see it all, and yet, none of it looked the same, because I wasn't the same. I had spent so much of my life trying to be included in their memories, trying to fit into a frame that was never built to hold me. But in chasing that, I had forgotten something more important. I could build my own story. I didn't need their camera. I didn't need their smile. I didn't need their frame. I had become the moment, and no one could crop me out of that. As I turned off the lights and stepped out into the night, I felt something lift, not pride, not vengeance. Something quieter, like closure, like breath after holding it too long. And somewhere, in a box under my bed, there's still that old photo, the one where I was cropped out. I keep it not as a wound, but as a reminder of who I was, and of the girl I never stopped becoming.